Yes. Okay, so welcome today to New Knowledge. We are excited to have Jenny K. Brown. She has spoken to us before, and we appreciate her time. She is with Kinetic Performance Coaching, and I'll let her tell you a little bit more about that. But today, the topic of conversation is change the perception, change the reality. Jenny K. Brown.
Thank you, thank you. I coach people on a variety of things, but two of the biggest things that I coach people on is time management, kind of overall organization, and then also communicating effectively with others. And so that's what we are going to talk about today, is how to communicate more effectively with others, to perhaps open the doors to communication a little bit more effectively so that people are more receptive to what it is that you have to say. So how many of you have heard the phrase, perception is reality? So meaning that it may not matter what your intention was, it matters how that person perceived it. And so you may have had very good intentions, but they did not perceive it that way, and their perception is the reality of the situation. That's what they're going to respond to. So today, we're going to talk about some ways that perhaps you can maybe change that perception to make them a little bit more open and receptive to what it is that you have to say. So how many of you send Christmas cards? And in those cards, do you still put a handwritten note?
Absolutely.
Yes, I'm impressed.
No.
He's like, no way, no way. So once upon a time, and bear with me, my clicker I think is on the fritz, so we're going to hope it works with this. Once upon a time, we would write these long letters, and we would make it very personal to the person that it was going to. You know, here's what's going on in my life with work and the kids, and what's going on with you and your job and your kids. And so we would make it very personal. We would take that time. But now, our Christmas cards look a little bit more like this,
Yep.
right? So now, we can pop it into Snapfish or Shutterfly and just send out kind of this blanket card. It's got pictures of the family. We sort of just let them figure out how things are going. We don't necessarily put a message on there. Now you can even upload it straight from your phone. You don't even have to necessarily be on a computer. And you can upload addresses and they'll send it out for you. So if you choose to do that, you don't even have to touch the card anymore. So we've gotten so digital, right? Everything is so connected. So how many of you have a smartphone or a tablet or a Facebook account or some other social media account? For some of our younger folks, they don't touch Facebook anymore. They're more into Instagram and Twitter and things like that. But most of us have one, if not all three of these, right? So we're just very, very connected. Everything is just at a touch of a button, very instant. We don't take that time anymore. And with that, we've lost some of the art of communication over time. It's kind of become this social media frenzy, right? Even the President of the United States is firing off on Twitter. Everything is just so instant. Somebody says something that we don't like, or they post something that we don't like, and you instantly respond. And almost instantly, we kind of regret it. It's like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that, or I didn't mean it that way, because everything is so instant. We're not taking that time. But effective communication does take time, and I hope that that is something that I really hope to drive home with you guys today, is that effective communication really does take time, because you do have to kind of plan and prepare and give it that personal touch, because each person is a little bit different, and knowing how to really respond to that personality type and that sort of thing is what I hope to drive home today. We have a lot of keyboard courage, a lot of things that we would be willing to say behind that screen. We would not probably say it to their face, at least not that way. So sometimes, as you'll see when we unpack all of this, we need to put that technology away so that we can return to that face-to-face. You're so brave and tough saying all that stuff on the internet. Did you want to say it to my face, or is it just keyboard courage? Many times it is just keyboard courage. Again, we wouldn't probably say it to their face if they were in front of us. We're doing a lot of this. We're yelling at people. This is my perspective. Don't you see? My way is the right way. We're just kind of screaming opinions at people now, and we're not really taking the time to listen to their perspective, to see where are you coming from? Why do you believe that? We're not taking that time anymore. So today I hope to unlock some secrets, if you will, to help you to have that free-flowing, open, effective communication. So there are 3 stages of communication that we are going to unpack. There is the proactive, which is kind of ahead of time. So before you even engage in conversation, it's kind of getting in the right mindset, having the right frame of mind to have an effective conversation. So how can you prepare with that? The coactive, which is in the moment of having that conversation, engaging in the moment. And then reactive, which can be in response to, but I want to kind of change your mindset today of reactive being more of a follow-up to what has happened. That conversation that you did have, revisiting what was said, and moving on from there. So our first stage, come on, clicker, is our proactive stage. So again, that's preparing to get into the right frame of mind. So with this stage, there's 2 problems that we're going to sort of unpack that we have typically in this phase. So the first one is that we think the world revolves around us. Everything is from your perspective, how that made me feel, what my thoughts are on that, what my opinion. So we kind of think everything is centered around us. The problem with that is, so does the person that you're talking to. And so this is kind of one of those secrets. We kind of logically know this, but in the moment, those emotions tend to take over, and we don't. Yes, sir?
I just wanted to say it's actually true for me because my dad did call me son.
Your dad did what?
My dad called me son.
Oh, so it did revolve around you. So the other person is also thinking that same thing. If we can adjust our mindset to know that that's how they're coming to the table, then we can kind of change what we're saying and doing to maybe unlock their gate a little bit to where they're not so self-centered in their thoughts during the conversation, okay? So, again, a lot of times we get heated in that moment. We scream at people of what our thoughts and opinions are. When we do that, it puts somebody on the attack. And when they do it to us, we feel like this. We feel kind of like a target, like, oh my gosh, why are you coming at me like that? Why are you screaming at me? Just talk to me. How many of you have ever been in a situation where you're like, why? Just talk to me, right? But then, so why do we do that to other people? If you go into a conversation in attack mode, expect a battle. If you go in with guns blazing, they're going to come back at you. So getting over that so that we can enter the conversation and open that door. So again, really the situation is we've kind of all got baggage that we're bringing to the table. Maybe that person just got diagnosed with cancer last week, or someone in their family did, or someone very close to them. Maybe they're having financial difficulties, and maybe that's taking a toll on their marriage. Maybe their kids are struggling in school or have gotten in trouble or something of that nature. So they're carrying baggage, and they're going to kind of respond that way. If you've ever gone through some stuff, put you in a different frame of mind. You're not really yourself. Tend to be a little grumpy, a little irritable. You might snap at people that normally you may not. But also, when those people say things to us, it can trigger things with our own baggage. Things you're bringing to the table from your childhood. Maybe you don't like it when somebody calls you a certain name, or they say a certain phrase that triggers something from your childhood, and so you come out guns blazing, right? So we all we all have baggage that we're bringing to the table. And so when you engage in conversation, and that person is a little irritable with you, if you knew that it was because they're dealing with cancer in their life, how would you respond differently? So if you knew that they were wrestling with that, when they're a little irritable, you might give them a little grace, right? You'd say, oh, I know you're going through a tough time. And you'd be a little more compassionate. But why does it take that kind of information for us to approach the conversation that way? So if we just go in knowing all of us are carrying something, even people who seemingly have perfect lives, I promise you, there is something behind the scenes that you don't know about. There's alcoholism, there's an affair, there's something. There's something. Everybody has baggage of some kind. And so we should enter that conversation with a little compassion, knowing that they also have baggage. Plus, we are all different. There are different personalities out there, different shades of personalities out there. The personality test that I have latched onto is called the color code. And what I like about it is there are 4 colors, 4 personality types, and you're going to fall into one of those. Now, that's not to say that I'm going to put you in a box. When you take the test, it does give you a pie chart, and so it will tell you what percentage of each of the colors that you are. But there is one color that is most dominant. And so that is your primary color. So will you have some nuances of the other colors? Sure. That's what makes you a full-fledged individual. But there's one thing that's going to drive you to make the choices that you make in your life. And that's what I love about this. And that does not change. So if you were a blue as a kid, you're going to be a blue as an adult. That will never change. Now, can you learn to adapt and overcome certain traits? If you're more introverted as a kid, maybe as an adult, you've learned how to be more extroverted. I can attest to that myself. I am naturally, believe it or not, a pretty introverted person. If you put me in a room, not in a situation like this, but maybe like a networking event, like if you guys been to a chamber event before, and you gotta just walk around and shake hands with strangers, that's an uncomfortable situation for me, believe it or not. Now, I can get up in front of you and speak because I have a musical theater background. So I've had lots of practice doing this, so this feels comfortable to me now. But just to walk up to strangers and say, hi, my name is Jenny, and make chit-chatty conversation is awkward for me. So you can learn to adapt and overcome certain things, certainly, but what drives you to behave the way that you do will never change. So, our 4 different personality types, we've got reds. They're driven by power. Power meaning moving from A to B, getting results out of the situation. They're very results-driven people. They're just going to get something done. They have great vision. That's the talent and the skill that they bring to the table, they have great vision on how to get those things done. And so as a result, the rest of us naturally want to follow them. So they are naturally the best leaders. Okay? That's not to say that other colors can't be a leader, but it is most natural to them because of that vision, and they get things done. They're very driven. On the flip side of that, they can be sometimes so focused on whatever it is that they're after that they can be a little abrasive if you get in their way. They tend to be the ones that are very critical, can be a little bossy. So any of the strengths that they have, being decisive, action-oriented, confident, can kind of swing in the opposite direction if it goes too far. So confidence can come off as arrogance. Okay? So just like with, in Star Wars, you've got the Force, may the Force be with you, right? The Force can be good or bad, though. How you use it can make it good or bad. So that's the other thing that I love about this particular test is none of the colors are good or bad or better than the others. They all have strengths and gifts that they bring to the table, but how they use that can come off in a negative way. They all have kind of that flip side depending on how they are in control of their life and their personality type. So blues, which is what I am, we're driven by intimacy. Intimacy meaning making meaningful connections. Now, typically, that means with other people, but it can also mean with your work, and that doesn't have to be paid work, but volunteer work, whatever you're passionate about, you can become really connected to that, to where you really kind of pour that blood, sweat, and tears. So as a result, the gifts and strengths that we bring to the table are service and quality. If I don't think I can do a good job at it, I'm not going to touch it. I'm very concerned about putting, if I'm going to put my stamp on it, it's going to be a good quality project. It matters how you do things. So blues and reds both like to control. Reds sometimes get a bad rep because they, if people are acting in a sort of controlling way, people will tend to say, oh, they're being very red right now. They might be very blue, but they're maybe in kind of a very bad space where they're controlling and hoarding things and not wanting other people to touch it because you're not going to do as good of a job as I am. So blues, that's how that can kind of turn to the flip side. But we like to help others, and we want to produce, like I said, a very good quality product. We're very detail-oriented, typically very organized people. We pay attention to the details so that it matters. It matters how you do it. Reds just want to get it done, results. Blues say it matters how you do it, process. Okay? Whites are driven by peace. Now that is peace amongst the environment as well as peace within themselves. They like to feel peaceful. They are the most introverted of all of the colors, naturally. They tend to just kind of sit on the outside and watch things go down. They don't insert themselves into a lot of situations, but as a result, what they bring to the table are clarity and tolerance. They don't get as ruffled up as the rest of us do about things, typically. Things sort of just roll off of them. They're very gentle spirits. They just sort of watch things happen. And so if we remember to ask them for their opinions or advice, they can have some really great nuggets of wisdom. So think Yoda. Very calm, serene, doesn't say much, but when he does, great pearls of wisdom. Okay? So very calm and gentle spirits. But on the flip side of them, when they don't feel in their peaceful, calm state, they can retreat, become unattached, uninvolved, can take a long time to get things done because they like to weigh all of the different perspectives it can make them appear very indecisive. They don't like to quickly make a decision because I need to weigh all of the information. And then finally we have our yellows. Yellows are driven by fun. So when it stops being fun, they might appear flighty. But because they very much live in the moment, they're very enthusiastic and optimistic. These are the people who generally seem happy all of the time, and they always kind of have this bouncy energy. They are naturally the most extroverted of all of the colors. They love being social. They love doing events and activities. They kind of flit and float from here to there, just whatever grabs their attention in that moment, okay? They tend to look at the world through rose-colored glasses. Even when the inevitable is kind of facing them, they are in a little bit of denial about it. They're afraid to face facts. So I also work part-time as the HR director at Chick-fil-A at Exit 7. We have a manager there who is a yellow manager. And even when we see our customer scores dropping, he will find some way to spin it in a positive way. Well, at least we got this comment. At least Cheryl was mentioned as a great cashier. Or he'll find some positive spin to put on it. He never will just let it kind of sit like, oh, our scores are down, guys. What's going on with that? Like, that is not something that would ever come out of his mouth. We actually have to prompt him to go, let's unpack this a little bit. Why are our scores dropping? Let's pick out some specific things that we can try to work on to bring those scores up. So they tend to look at the world through rose-colored glasses. They're always generally very happy people, optimistic, enthusiastic. Those are the people you want to have on board if you're trying to roll out like a new policy or a new procedure. Get those people on board. They'll be your champions and your cheerleaders for that. So these are the 4 different personality types. Again, you can have nuances of all of the colors depending on kind of what your pie chart looks like. My particular pie chart, for example, I am mostly a blue, but my red is a very strong secondary color for me. But my white and my yellow are very, very tiny slivers of my pie. So apparently I'm not fun and I'm not peaceful. Super controlling. So, you know, just depending on kind of how your spread is, you may identify with a lot of those pieces, or you may identify with only 1 or 2. So we do recognize that, but the key here is to own what your primary color is, both the good and the bad of that, so that you can be aware of what you are bringing to the table when you come to a conversation with someone, but also to kind of be aware of what they might be bringing to the table. So if I'm sitting down with a yellow and we're talking about planning an event, they're going to have a lot of great ideas and they're going to be very enthusiastic about it, but they are not going to be great at coming up with the action plan and seeing that through. Your reds and your blues are going to be better at seeing things through. Your whites and your yellows are not as good at the follow-through, but they are great with ideas. So just knowing different things like that about these different personalities can really help to shape and mold your conversation as you get into it with folks. So our solution here, again, our problem was thinking that the world kind of revolves around us, but remembering, of course, then that everybody's bringing baggage to the table and everybody is different. And so our solution here is remembering that it is not just about us. The world is not here to serve us and to make us feel better, but we are put on this earth for a purpose and a reason to serve this world and make it better. Don't take it personally. So when those reds are a little abrasive or that yellow cancels plans because they're flighty, it's not necessarily because they have a problem with you in particular. That's just the way that personality type behaves. So another example I'll give you, as a blue, I am drawn to yellows, as most of us are. They're fun people. They make us laugh. They're social. They bring out that in me, and so I naturally would gravitate to that. As I got older, I had a lot of my childhood friends that I'm still connected with to take this, and found that several of them were yellow. So how that played out growing up is I would think oh, so-and-so is, one of my best friends, and we would make plans, and they would flake out on me a lot. And I took it very personally, like, why don't people like me? Why can't I keep friends? And I would get very upset about it. Now, looking back, I go, it's because I was surrounded with yellows, and it really didn't have anything at all to do with me. That's just kind of the way that personality type is. And so now that I know that, if I kind of know what a color somebody is, and sometimes they haven't taken the test, but I can kind of gauge just based on behaviors and words that they say and different things like that, I've learned to not take it so personally, because that's just the way that personality type behaves. Do any of you know who Brené Brown is? I love Brené Brown. I've just gotten into her probably the last 3 or 4 years. Love a lot of her stuff. So there's a audio thing that I downloaded called The Power of Vulnerability. And one of the things that she says in that is, are you trying to make this world a better place, or are you making it a worse place? So are you living purposefully every day with trying to make this world a better place? Or do you spend a lot of time in that self-centered place of how I feel, how people are making me feel, and kind of thinking that way, which can then kind of project out some negative stuff to the world? So living purposefully to really make this world a better place. So our second problem is we think that people can read our mind, when in fact they cannot, unless they have some superpower that we have yet to untap. Most people cannot read minds. So we have to tell them what's on our minds. And a lot of times what I hear is, well, I thought it was common sense. Common sense to who? To me, it's common sense to have lists and calendars and be organized and prioritize your day. That's just the way my brain works on a daily basis. Before I even step out of bed every day, I've got the day mapped out in my mind of how it's going to go. That's just the way my mind works. But that's not the way everybody's brain works. And so I might think it's common sense just to have your calendar of how your day is mapped out, but that might not be common sense to you, because you might be a yellow and you live in the moment. And so I don't make plans. I have a brother who's a yellow. He does not make plans ever. We're still trying to figure out what we're doing for Thanksgiving, because he won't give me a definitive answer of what he wants to do, because in his mind, it's probably going to change anyway, so why make plans? I'll just roll with it and go with the flow. Okay? So what might be common sense to you may not be common sense to somebody else. So we have to be very specific and intentional when we engage in conversation, so that we're very clear on what our expectations are. So we want to be very clear with our expectations and boundaries through SMART action plans. We want to be armed with multiple ways to relay a message, and we want to give feedback. And I'm going to unpack each one of these. So how many of you know what a SMART action plan is? You've heard that somewhere. You know you should be using it. How many of you actually apply it to your daily plans? So it's one of those, it's like, it's great in theory, but then we don't take, but see, then here's again common sense for me. Common sense, like if I have a goal, so I have actually lost 24 pounds since the end of June. Super excited. 25 was my goal by Thanksgiving. I have 1 more week to lose that last pound. So I sat there and mapped it out on my calendar. I want to be this weight by this date, I'm going to be this. Mapped it out. Here's how my exercise is going to go for the week. here's what my eating plan is going to look like for the week. Like, that's just the way my brain works, okay? But I realize that not everybody, obviously that's why I have a job, right? Because not everybody really thinks that way. So when we apply that SMART action plan, we've got to have all 5 of these steps for it to really work. So we've got to be specific. So when I wanted to lose that weight, I didn't just say, I need to lose weight, because we all say that, I need to lose weight. I want to lose 25 pounds. Very specific number. Because otherwise I can't measure my progress. So do any of you run? So when you run, you kind of map out in your head, I'm going to do a 5K. I need to know where my mile markers are along the way. You don't just set out on a race and never know how far you're going or where the finish line is. That would be miserable, right? So we have to be very specific so that along the way we can measure our progress and see how we're doing. Where am I in relation to where the goal is? How much of it have I completed? If you ever do a fundraising drive or anything like that, United Way has those thermometers where they kind of measure, we've gotten this much money, we've gotten this much money. They're measuring their progress along the way. Is it actionable? So again, with losing that weight, I was like, I'm going to track my food on MyFitnessPal. I'm going to work out 5 to 6 days a week. I'm going to fast. Any of you heard of intermittent fasting? That's like the new craze, right? So I'm doing that 2 days a week. The other 3 days during the week, I do like low fat, low carb, high protein foods. But on the weekends, I kind of relax a little bit. And if I want to have pizza or cake or whatever, somebody's birthday, I'll celebrate and enjoy, okay? So then, and not everybody can do that. I've had some people go, well, if I get off the wagon, I won't get back on. So do what's right for you. But for me, I need to have some chocolate and some sweets and stuff every so often, or I feel deprived. So that was my, compromise for myself. So, but all of that is very actionable. I can say, yes, I've done that, or no, I haven't. It's very actionable how I plan to achieve this goal. Is it relevant? So, my daughter is going to turn 7 in January. I have been wanting to lose this weight since she was born 7 years ago. Why haven't I done it before now? Well, I had 3 people in my life this year that were diagnosed with cancer, and one of them passed away. 2 of them were folks that I grew up with, so they're my same age. Freaked me out. I'll be honest. For whatever reason, that kind of lit the fire under me, and I went, I have got to get back in control of my health. So it wasn't really relevant before. Like, sure, I wanted to do it, but I didn't have that fire lit. So you've got to find what's going to light the fire for you or for your group, for your team, whatever you're trying to apply this action plan to. You've got to kind of find what makes it relevant now. Why do this now? And then it's got to be timely. You have to have a time frame. So for me, it was by Thanksgiving. And I kind of overachieved a little bit because I was like, if I lose more than I really need to lose, I'm going to probably put 5 or so back on during the holidays. So that'll give me a little cushion. And so when all is said and done, I'll be about where I need to be. So putting that time frame on it. Most people, when they set a goal, they're missing either the specific piece or the timely piece. So when we fail at our goals, look at particularly those 2 pieces. Those are the 2 that I find most people miss the mark on. That's what you've forgotten when you set out with this plan. The timely piece, I do highly recommend putting it on a calendar. If you're a calendar person. If you're not a calendar person, it may not do anything for you. But if you're a calendar person, do put it on that calendar. I live by a calendar. I've just got too much going on in my life to not live by a calendar. So when I put it on there, it's that constant reminder. I'm going to see it, and I've got to accomplish it. And what I tell my clients is, if you miss the mark, reschedule it. You know, I was going to do this thing by this day. Did you do it? Well, no. Did you reschedule it? So don't just, well, I missed it, and toss it out the window. Just reschedule it. Push it out a little bit. But keep it on that calendar. Any questions about SMART action plans? Yes, ma'am.
Well, being mostly yellow, it's fun to make all the lists and plans, but following through, what do you do?
So my recommendation for yellows is to find someone who will hold you accountable. Yellows don't naturally follow through with things very well. You get very excited. If you are truly a yellow, what I find, yellows get very excited about something initially, and they'll start something, and it will start great, but then as weeks go on, they sort of fall away from it. So find somebody that you trust to keep you accountable. That's probably going to be a red or a blue personality type, to keep you accountable to whatever it is that you're trying to get done.
Okay, but
And that's not going to be fun, but it's what you need.
okay.
So my brother that's a yellow keeps dating these girls who are super controlling blues. And for a while I was going, why does he keep picking these girls? But
We know why.
But it's because he needs that in his life. There's a payoff there. He may not like it always, but there's a payoff. They're keeping him in line to where he doesn't have to think about anything. He doesn't have to plan anything because they do it all. That's the payoff for him. But then he doesn't like the way that they control sometimes.
And his sister's a blue.
And I'm a blue.
And it's familiar.
Yes. So, but that's my recommendation, is find, of the private clients, one-on-one clients that I've had, I would say at least 50% of them have been yellow personalities. You crave somebody to help you with that piece, but you may not like it. You recognize that you need it. So, any other questions about SMART action plans? So that's one piece of the puzzle. The other piece is, how many of you have said, I told them 12 times to fill in the blank? But you told them, did you try another way? So this has really been driven home with me now that I have children, because of course I tell them 12, I have told you 50 times to not do this thing. But have I tried another way? And that challenges me. It really does. But, you know, have we tried another way? Did we try with pictures? Did we tell a story that might illustrate a point a little bit better? Did we say it with facts and figures? Some people need that. Your reds and your whites need the logic, what makes sense. I want the bullet points and the facts and figures. Did we say it in writing versus being verbal? I'm a very visual person, personally. If you tell me something, it may not register, or I may not retain that information, or I may not understand it at all. My husband is a red, very visionary. He's wanting to do some renovations on our house, and he's talking just crazy things. What if we did this and bumped this wall? My brain cannot wrap around that. Draw me a picture or physically walk me through the building and tell me what it is that you're trying to do. Because I'm a very visual person. At work, if people try to catch me and say, hey, can you send me this? Can you order this for me? Send me an email or a text. I need it in writing because I'm not going to remember later. Say it with a phone call. That's something we don't do a lot of anymore. We've just gotten really comfortable with texting, which can be fine, but sometimes the phone call would be better. Do we say it in person? Do we find creative ways to illustrate it? And do we say it with passion? Passion wins. If you're excited about something, you're going to be able to get somebody else more excited about it. If I stood up here and I was talking to you guys like this, how many of you would still be with me right now? Right? But I try to be engaging, and I try to be passionate and exciting, try to ask questions to keep you with me. So when you say it with passion and excitement, that's going to more likely get somebody else on board with you. That's why yellows are great cheerleaders, because they're very enthusiastic. So trying different ways to get a hold of somebody. So at Chick-fil-A, we do semi-annual evaluations for all of the team members. And sometimes when I'm trying to schedule these appointments, people are not very receptive. And so I have to try a lot of these different ways. I'll text them, I will email them, and if all else fails, I will catch them in the store and say, when can we meet? And put it on the calendar right then and there. So try different ways. And I know a lot of you are saying, well, that feels like babysitting, or I don't have time for that. And I hear you, but just know that effective communication takes time. And then finally, we're going to give feedback. And we want to give the positive as well as the constructive. We've gotten pretty good at being constructive with people, although I wouldn't say it's probably constructive. Critical would be a better word. But we're not very good at the positive reinforcement. I really like it when you do that. Can you do that again? Or you're really great at organizing. Why don't you lead this project? You're really good at talking to people. Why don't you be our spokesperson? We're not always great with that piece of it, recognizing those strengths that people bring to the table and giving them that positive feedback so that they know, oh, that's what I'm good at, so let me use that, more of that. There's an exercise that I do in one of the leadership development classes that I do where we do an exercise on feedback. So we will pick somebody, send them out of the room. The rest of us will decide something that that person is going to do when they come in the room. It might be pick up this piece of paper specifically, okay? So we call them back in, and we just tell them to move. There's something that we want you to do. Just move through this space, try some different things. We'll let you know if you're on the right track. So the first time that they do it, we only give them negative feedback. So if they were to walk this way, we would go, no, no, no. But if they start walking in the right direction, we don't say anything. And the first time, it takes a while for people to really get the grasp of like, what's happening and why are they screaming no at me? But they finally figure it out. The second time they come in, we do a different person, different action. They only get positive reinforcement. So if they are moving in the right direction, we're yes, yes, hot, yes. If they're moving in the wrong direction, nothing. The third time we go through it, they get both. Yes, no, hot, cold, hot, cold. They correct very quickly then. Right? Because if I'm moving in the wrong, no, no, yes, 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 yes. They correct very quickly. So I do that exercise with them to illustrate that people perform best and correct best when they are receiving both types of feedback. Yes, do this, no, don't do that. Yes, do this, don't do that. When they get both kinds. If they only get good feedback, what typically happens in life?
They cry when you say something negative?
Yes, can absolutely. They get very, it's very jarring to them then when they do receive any kind of constructive feedback, because they kind of have this overinflated idea of, I'm great. I do lots of great things. Everybody likes me. So then if somebody says anything to the contrary, it might not even be a really bad comment, but they just give them some kind of feedback. Could you move a little faster? I need more sense of urgency with this project. It's like, oh, you know, they're very put off by it. Can cry, I've seen it. What happens if somebody is only receiving the negative? Don't do this. I don't like it when you do that. Quit, withdraw,
Feel like you can't do anything right.
can't do anything right. I wrestle with that in my son so much. I'll preface it by saying he's a foster kid, so there's a lot of things that we've had to correct, behaviors that we've had to correct to get him, you know, kind of functioning more normally, quote unquote. But I wrestle with that because if he gets too much of that, I don't want him growing up thinking, I can't do anything right. Mom is always picking on me. And it's not that. He does some right things. He's a yellow personality, I'm pretty darn sure. Everybody loves him. He's super charming, full of energy, very much in the moment. So there's a lot of good that he brings to the table, but there's just so many other behaviors that I've got to correct that I really wrestle with that. And you know, there's times that I have to go, I'm not going to fight that battle today. I'm going to let it go today, just because I don't want to hound him so much. So it's really important that we use both types of feedback to get the best results. Any questions about that? So recap on our proactive stage. Again, we want to come in with the right attitude and perspective. So remembering that it's not just about us. The world does not just revolve around us. Everybody's got their own stuff that they're bringing to the table. So we need to have a little bit of compassion. Maybe be aware of what type of personality type they have and what we might be dealing with there and how you might need to adjust the conversation based on that. So having that right attitude and perspective. And then being clear about those expectations and boundaries, putting it in writing, saying it different ways, having those smart action plans. Any questions on our proactive phase before we get into our coactive phase?
Was there a better way to give negative feedback? Correcting?
So there is a reason why I'm still doing all of the evaluations at our store. Yes, there is. So what I find is, first and foremost, you do want to highlight the strengths of that person. Everybody's got them. I do realize sometimes it's really hard to pull that out. But search within yourself and within that person. Think really hard. There's something that person is good at. Highlight that first. It makes them more receptive and provides a little bit of a buffer for then what comes next. Then to say, but what I would like you to work on is. So that indicates it's possible to change it. It is going to require some work and some effort on their part. But I'm not saying you're a bad person. You suck at this job. What I'm saying is these are the things that you're really good at, and so that's why we might put you in this position, in that position. But you really wrestle with being organized or time management or how you speak to your team members. So one of the things on our evaluations at Chick-fil-A, they do kind of a 1 to 5 number scale, 5 being the best, 1 being the worst, of how they interact with guests and how they interact with their team members. And it's really interesting sometimes to see the people who can turn it on, so to speak, for the guests, They get high marks for that, but then turn around and get lower marks for how they speak to their team members. So it's really interesting because they obviously know how to do it because they turn it on for the guests. Why then do you drop that when you're dealing with your team members? So we have to work on that. So illustrations, again, kind of showing different ways. So that's kind of an illustration for me to say, here's our disconnect. You're able to turn it on for the guests. The guests love you. But what's happening here with the team members? What I'm hearing is that during stressful times, you might kind of bark orders, you're very demanding, you talk down to people, whatever the thing is, So how can we work on that?
What do you find that whenever they do to the customers that they're good and to the team members not? How do you deal with that in your job?
So how do I deal with the fact that they are one way to the guests and then a different way to the team member? I mean, I do just like that. I say, so apparently you're able to kind of turn it on for the guests. So I know that it's within you to do that. How can we bring some of that to your team members? So can you think of some examples where maybe you've gotten stressed and said the wrong things? Okay, what would be a different way to handle that? We talked through some specific examples. I've got one girl in particular that I'm thinking of that she is a red personality type and got very high marks for the guests, but when she's dealing with the team members, can be abrasive, can be critical, can be bossy. And so one of the things that I gave her to try, I said sometimes just please and thank you can go a very long way. So let's start with that, and let's see how that goes as far as people receiving you. Can I have that, please? And so then in the moment, because about 2 days a week, I'll actually help out during lunch. So if you happen to be up there during lunch on Tuesdays and Thursdays, you might see me. But so if I hear her, so something happened the other day, and I heard her ask for something, and I said, please, like I remind her, and she was like, please, so finding a small step that they can try to kind of start them in that direction, and then, okay, you've mastered that. How is that going? How do you think the team's receiving that? Now what's something else you can try? Does that make sense? Sure. So to kind of recap this whole section, I thought this summed it up very well. Please take responsibility for the energy that you bring into this space. So again, if you come in with guns blazing, trying to attack someone, expect a battle. Because their defenses are going to be up. They're going to feel that energy. And they're going to respond in a defensive way. But if you come in relaxed and calm and prepared, it's going to be a different story. They're going to perceive you as kind, compassionate, calm, right? So that's where, kind of circle back to the title of this, changing that perception. So that energy that you bring to the table can make or break that perception. They're either going to perceive you in an attacking way, or they're going to perceive you in a way that they will be more receptive because you're trying to help. So our next piece is the coactive, which is the actual engagement of conversation. So you're in the moment, having the conversation with this person. So you have already kind of mentally prepared, you know all of that stuff, you come in with the right attitude, and we engage in conversation. So remember that this is a two-way street. But a lot of times we like to talk at someone instead of turning it into a dialogue. We're trying to recite a monologue. And we tell them all the things that we're thinking and feeling, And we forget to check in with them periodically to see, what are your thoughts? How are you feeling? Right? Don't spend time beating on a wall hoping it will transform into a door. How many times have you said, I feel like I'm beating my head against a brick wall talking to this person? Maybe you are, but is that necessarily their fault? Have you created an environment that is conducive for two-way conversation? Or have you come at them? Because there's a difference. So the solution here is ask versus tell. And we do that by asking great questions. Who, what, when, where, why, and how. Something that requires more than just a yes or a no response. Something that they are actually going to have to kind of dig in and give you an answer. More than just nodding a head or shaking a head. They've got to come up with something. When I was going through my coaching, or my training for coaching, this was one of the first skills that they had us to master. And so our first couple of exercises that we would have with homework partners was based around this. And so we would take turns. So for 15 minutes, I was the coach and she was my client, and then we reversed roles. We did kind of this role play scenario. But as the coach, I could only ask questions. I could say no statements. So everything that she responded with, I would have to come up with another who, what, when, where, why, or how question to continue the conversation moving forward. So what that does is it kind of lets guards down a little bit because you're asking for their perspective. You're sharing perspectives. So they feel like what they think and feel and experience matters. And perspective does matter. So here we have a number on the ground. And depending on where the person is standing, they either see a 6 or a 9. Neither one is wrong, but it does matter where you're standing to see that perspective. And so if I'm the person that is standing on the 9 side and I'm just screaming at the person, how stupid are you? That is a 9. Oh my gosh, how can you not see that? You're so wrong. And that person standing here going, oh my God, that person has lost their mind. This is a 6. What are they talking about? And why are they screaming at me? But if either one would take just a second, take that time for that effective communication to see the other perspective, share those perspectives. Hey, you come over here with me and see it from my side. Now let me come over here to your side. Let me see what you're, okay, all right, I can see where you would see that. Now how do we move on from here? Many times I'm called in as the mediator for situations that erupt in the workplace. And typically what I find is both sides have a valid point of some kind, but the truth lies somewhere in the middle. And this person said that because of what this person came in with, this energy, these words, this action. This person responded to it. All this person sees is the response. And this person's saying, well, they kind of started it. Both are right. Now how do we move on from here? But part of my job is to help each see how they played a role in that miscommunication or that fall down. And so helping them to share perspectives and then say, okay, so if this happens next time, what are we going to do? How do we move on from here? Again, asking those questions, who, what, when, where, why, how. It's not what you said, it's how you said it. How many of us have said that? Particularly to our spouses, if you have one. It's not what you said, it's how you said it. The tone matters. The tone matters. And that's what, circling back to the question that she had asked in kind of the work situation, that particular girl that I said, using the please and thank you can change that tone. Because normally, if we're going to throw please and thank you in there, we're not going to, can I have a such and such please? Usually, if you're going to add the please in there, it's going to have a softer tone. Can I have such and such please? It's going to naturally soften the tone. So the tone matters. That particular girl would say, I need a 6-count nugget. I'm waiting on a deluxe. Can I have a deluxe, please? When you have a chance? Hey, Noah, when you're done with that, can you get me a 6-count nugget, please? Received better, yes? Don't you type at me in that tone of voice. So if you're tech savvy and you see all caps, what does that typically mean? You're yelling. But some people always type in all caps because it's easy and they're not super tech savvy, and so they just leave it on caps lock and they just type away. If you know the person well, you may know that. But if you don't, and this is your first engagement with them, you may think, why is this person yelling at me all the time? So a lot of stuff can get lost in translation when we're doing it over text. So if you see something like this, great. No punctuation. It can be, great, that's awesome. Or it can be, great. But you don't know. Or, wow. Wow, that person has lost their mind. Wow, that is so great. Wow, that is really sad news. But we don't know. So here's a funny little illustration of lost in translation. Dad says, Mom's back in the hospital, LOL. Kid says, what? Why is that funny? Dad says, it's not funny. The kid says, then why did you laugh out loud? Dad said, laugh out loud? I thought it meant lots of love. So there's a lot of studies being done now about this new language that is evolving because of all of the texting. And now we're not even spelling things out. We're doing LOLs and THX for thanks and all of these kind of abbreviations and acronyms. It's like a whole new language. And if you're not in with that language, you're going to kind of infer your own meaning to it, which may or may not be correct. So you have to kind of know your audience. So the solution here is to ditch the technology sometimes. Now, I'm not saying all the time, because you can use that as one of the ways to try to communicate with somebody, particularly if you're trying different methods and you have a younger person. They're not going to answer the phone, and they're not going to have voicemail that's even set up. That's the new thing that I'm running into. I call to leave a message, and this voicemail has not been set up. How do you not have a voicemail that's set up? But they won't check it, even if you do leave them a message. So texting can work, but sometimes, particularly if it's a tough conversation, you have tough news to deliver, emotions are already charged, it's better to ditch the technology and let's just do it face to face. You miss a lot of the nonverbals that come with communication. Anybody in here take like a social psychology class at some point and they talk about those nonverbals, So, if somebody is sitting like this and legs are crossed, they're what? Aggravated, closed off, not receptive. They tell you, the best way to have conversation is like this, wide open. But you miss a lot of that. You miss the facial expressions, you miss the tone of voice, you miss all of those nuances when we're just texting. It's really hard to infer what somebody means. Sarcasm is lost a lot. People think it's there when it's not there or not intended to be there, or they take it the wrong way. Somebody's meaning it as a sarcastic kind of joke, and somebody takes it at face value, and so they get offended. So sometimes it's better to just ditch that technology so that we can get all those nuances. Sometimes people, again, are not hip on the new lingo with all those acronyms and abbreviations. And then sometimes everything is too instant. And we need time for those emotions to cool off. Because when we fire off in that moment, again, we might say something that if I were calmer, if I took time to step away, I might not say that or that way. So sometimes we need to just put it down and step away from the keyboard, give it time to cool off. That's something that I personally have worked on here in the last decade or so, because I used to be one of those people that, you've said something and I'm fired up and I'm going to shoot that email back or shoot that text back. And now I've learned I'm not even going to respond to that right now because I know I'm not going to say anything nice. So let me put that down, and I'll respond once I've cooled down and thought through a more tactful way to say that. Texting is a brilliant way to miscommunicate how you feel and misinterpret what other people mean. So again, sometimes we may not intend to be sarcastic, but they took it that way. Or we might not intend to be mean, but they took it that way. And our third problem is that we've gotten really good at shaming people. So we put people on the spot, we single them out, we make them feel bad. Now we're seeing things where parents are putting kids on signs. Kids have done something wrong. They put a sign on them and stand them out on the street corner to shame them. Shaming is not going to get the behavior that you want out of that person. It might for that moment, maybe, but long term, you're going to do way more damage. And the next time you go to engage in conversation with that person, they're going to be more reluctant. They're going to have those guards up. They're going to be defensive because they know that you're coming for an attack, because that's a tactic that you use. So our solution here is to praise publicly and correct privately. And I do use the word correct or coach very deliberately, because if you Google this, it will say criticize. And I don't like that word, because criticize is an attack. My intention is to change the behavior, not to make you feel bad about yourself. And so when I am working with developing leaders and teaching them how to have tough conversations with people, that's the thing that I keep reminding them, is what is your intention with this conversation? Do you want to hurt their feelings? Are you trying to make them feel bad? Most of the time the answer is no. Like, that's not usually our intention. I just want them to stop doing blah, blah, blah. Okay, so your intention is to change the behavior. So approach the conversation in a helpful way. Don't go in attacking, because again, you go in attacking, they're going to give you a battle. And then don't take the passive-aggressive route of blanket statement emails unless it's truly a blanket statement. Do all of you have, let's say, a break room in your place of employment? Okay? So let's say you have an employee who brings tuna for lunch like every day. And then when they're done with their lunch, they throw the empty can in the trash. It really just stinks up the break room. Now you know that it's this one person that's doing that. But instead of talking to that one person, you send a blanket email to everybody that says, hey guys, if you're gonna eat fish, please discard of your trash outside of the building because it really stinks up the break room.
Or move the trash can.
So by sending the blanket email, what do you think has happened? So for those who are not the guilty party, what are they thinking?
It's that person's fault.
That person did it. Why are they sending me the email? I'm not the one leaving the tuna fish can in the trash. I'm not the one stinking up the place. And for that person, what are they now thinking?
Everybody knows they were shamed.
Everybody knows. If you had a problem with it, why didn't you just come to me? That's what I always hear. If people had a problem with that, why didn't they just come to me? If you were the guilty person, how would you feel? Now having your dirty laundry, so to speak, aired for everybody to see. So if it's an isolated issue, and that's always my first question when people are like, oh, we need to send out an email about blah, blah, blah. Is this a blanket issue or is this an isolated issue? Are we talking about 1 or 2 people or are we talking about like a handful to 10 people? You know, is this something that I really, it requires a blanket email, or can I just pull these 2 people into the office and have a conversation with them? I would say 50% of the time, it's an isolated issue. So, kind of ask yourself that the next time you go to fire off an email or you see a blanket email come across. You know, is this something that could have been handled better in a private conversation versus being aired out publicly? Because nobody likes to be shamed, criticized publicly, but we all like the accolades when we do something right. So, you know, look at Susie Go. She's really just lighting up the sales this month. Look at her, you know. People love that. But you're not meeting your sales quota. I don't necessarily want that broadcast to everybody. I feel bad enough about it as it is. Or in the case of the tuna issue, you know, maybe they didn't even know that it was an issue. And now you've shamed them for it. So, praise publicly, but coach and correct privately. And our final problem in this stage is that many times we will watch people struggle because we don't want to get in it. I don't have time for that. I don't want to get wrapped up in the drama. Whatever your reason might be, but we kind of watch people flounder a little bit. So our solution here is, how can I help you? So if you are a leader in the workplace, instead of saying, hey, you were supposed to have this on my desk by such and such a time, where is it? Why isn't it done? Hey, we had talked about you putting this on my desk by 5 o'clock today. It's not here. What's going on? How can I help you to get this done? Because what I've found out a lot of times is people don't know how to prioritize very well. And if you're a leader, your priorities might be different than the lower ranking employee. Particularly if you work in a very customer-driven environment, that frontline person is consumed by the customers and what they want and their demands, and so that's what's their priority. And so if you're asking for something that is outside of that realm, it may be lower on their totem pole of priorities. So if that is a top priority for you, you have to communicate that to them so that they understand, hey, I know you've got a lot going on, it's been a busy day, whatever. I need for you to make this your top priority for the next 48 hours because we really have this deadline and I need this done. But sometimes you have to communicate that because it's not going to be common sense to them because your priorities are different. So asking things like, how can I help you prepare for success? What do you need from me? You've sat down, you've created this SMART action plan. Saying something as simple as, what do you need from me to make this happen? How can I help you to prepare for success? What do you need to be successful with this? Be the light that helps others to see. So again, I kind of circle back to that phrase from Brené Brown. Are you making this world a better place, or are you making it a worse place? Sometimes all it would take is that one question of, how can I help you, to really break down the walls for somebody and get them moving again. Because maybe they just felt overwhelmed. Maybe they didn't know how to ask for help. Maybe they thought asking for help would make them look like they can't do their job, but they're doing two people's jobs because somebody left. So sometimes just asking that simple question, throwing that life raft to can be the one thing that they needed to pull out of that. So just to recap, we're going to be asking those great questions, the who, what, when, where, why, how. Sometimes you want to ditch that technology, particularly in those tough situations or if emotions are charged. We want to put that technology away. We want to praise publicly and correct privately. And then, how can I help you? What do you need from me? Any questions about this piece before we move on to our final piece?
I just have a quick comment.
Yes, ma'am.
Carnegie, the steel magnate, he never told his employees to do things. He always asked them.
Yes.
And
Can you please blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And that is a shift in the workplace in general, I would say over the last 15 to 20 years, because baby boomers grew up in more of an era where it was command and control, command and control. You had one person in charge and all of the little minions, and they would just bark orders. And now we've moved to a much more collaborative work environment. But if you work in a place that you have multi-generational employees, that can be a disconnect sometimes. Because again, you have kind of your senior members who have been there in the workplace for 30, 40 years now, and the way that they came up through the ranks was, this is just what you do. You bark orders, and you didn't cry about it because they didn't mean anything by it. It's just what you did. And they say jump, and you say how high, and that's just the way it went. But now we're in this environment where we're asking questions, and can you please, and what are your thoughts and feelings, and a very collaborative environment. But that can, like I said, be a barrier if you have several different generations in your workplace. Any other questions? Thank you. So our final piece is reactive. So again, it can be kind of that knee-jerk reaction, but I hope to challenge you a little bit and change your paradigm on this a little bit today, to think of it more of a revisiting and a follow-up to what has then gone down. So you've gone into the conversation, you are mentally prepared, you're in the right state of mind, right attitude, you get in the conversation, stuff happened, good or bad, maybe. How do you follow up? So, inevitably, pardon me, I am going to get some of this water. inevitably you will mess up. At some point you will mess up. I teach this stuff. I know it like the back of my hand. I still make mistakes, particularly with my kids, because the emotions are there. And sometimes our emotional reaction is not the best reaction. So you will mess up. But what will you then do with that? So even if you planned and prepared, you know all of the stuff, you get in that conversation, and somewhere along the way, it derailed. What do you do about it? Maybe you did this. You got in their face and emotions got going and you just started screaming at them. Maybe not scream, but you went at them. Maybe there was a disconnect in what was being said. You're saying one thing, they thought you meant another. You're just not coming together. It's kind of like, did anybody in here take a foreign language in like high school, college? But it's been a while. You might hear it now and you're like, I can kind of pick out some things. But if you ask me to speak Spanish right now, it would be very, very bumpy and disjointed. But I can listen to it and sometimes understand more than I can speak. But sometimes in these kind of conversations, that happens. You're saying things, but maybe you're not getting the full thought process out. I find that happens a lot with Reds. My husband is a Red, by the way. I don't know if I mentioned that. So one of the things I tease him about is he will get 4 steps down the road in his mind, but I only get the last step that comes out of his mouth. So I didn't get the dots connected along the way. And so he will just come out of left field with something, and I go, what? So one day we're driving home from church, and he goes, like those purple ones over there. What are you talking about? Those trees. What about those trees? Like we were talking about getting some for our house. I want some like that. Oh, okay. Thanks for connecting the dots. But that happens a lot. And so that can happen in conversation when we sit down with somebody. You don't get the full thought out. You only give them pieces. And so they sort of piece together what they think you meant, but that's not exactly what you meant. So there might have been a disconnect there. Plus, again, we get into that keyboard courage. Again, even though you know the stuff, it might still happen. I can't tell you how many times I've started to respond to somebody, and then I get into it and I go, back. So I'm learning to control that, but it's hard initially. It's really hard because that's not the way the world works right now. Everything is so instant and everything is so emotionally charged right now. It takes work. It takes mindfulness to really step back from that and not participate in that. So the first problem is that we say, I'm only responsible for what I say, not for what you understand. But that is honestly the essence of this whole workshop, is understanding that you are responsible for what you bring to this table, that energy that you bring, those words that you bring, and depending on what you bring to the table can change the way that that person perceives and receives that information. So remember, it is a two-way street. What kind of driver are you going to be? Are you going to be the driver with the road rage that's just kind of pushing his way around and speeding and zipping and changing lanes? Or are you going to be that polite driver that lets people merge and go ahead and turn? And so ideally, we should be that more polite driver. Again, I know it's hard. I have terrible road rage. I will be the first to tell you. I'm very calm and collected in most of what I do on a daily basis, but when I get in that car, it changes. I'm very, I'm trying to get somewhere, get out of my way. It's hard. So our solution here is to own it. You can't control other people's actions, but you can control how you react to it. So even if somebody comes at you charged and armed and defensive, you don't have to engage in that. You have a choice. You can walk away. You can say, whoa, what's going on here? Let's take a step back. Obviously, something's going on with you today. Do you want to talk about that? Because I was just talking about this, and I feel like there's a lot more behind this. Again, communication is a two-way street. How are you navigating that street? Are you making it receptive for both ways? Or are you just charging into it, not paying any attention to the other person? And remember that people respect those who can own their mistakes and act to correct them. So again, when I'm kind of developing new leaders, this is one of the points that I drive home. You will make mistakes. You will say the wrong thing. You're not going to get it right every time. But when you do make a mistake, what do you do with it? You should circle back to that person and say, you know what, I was wrong to have barked at you earlier, snapped at you. I shouldn't have used that tone of voice. What I was trying to convey was, but I let emotions get the best of me. People are going to respect that more than if you just kind of charge ahead like nothing happened. Because we're all human and we all make mistakes, and all of us recognize that to an extent. Now, if you're doing that a lot, it's going to lose, your apologies are going to lose their value as well. But if you're just, every once in a while, it was a heated time, stressful time, people understand that. We're all human. We all make mistakes. And if you're willing to own it and say, I messed up, I'm sorry, people respect that more. You are always responsible for how you act, no matter how you feel. And this is the hardest part. Because again, we all have baggage. We all have stuff that we're carrying around. Even if you've got a crappy load of stuff right now, people can be forgiving to an extent if they know what's going on. But again, if you stay in that space for too long, people kind of stop being forgiving. So even though you're going through a lot, you have to try to muster the right energy for engagement. It starts with you. Having that effective communication, that two-way street, starts with you and the energy that you bring into this space. Take responsibility to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. Take responsibility for what you're bringing to the table, own it, and that's going to help to move things forward better. So here's how to apologize effectively. First, you definitely want to say the words, I'm sorry. So let's say that together. I'm sorry. You have to say those words. You can't say, well, they know what I meant. They don't know what you meant. You have to spell it out. And then you have to name it. I'm sorry for biting your head off earlier. I'm sorry for screaming at you. I'm sorry for dropping the ball. I'm sorry for fill in the blank.
I'm sorry you're an idiot.
No. I'm sorry we had a miscommunication. I'm sorry I was not clear on the expectations. But you want to name it. Why is that important? You're owning it. And it's not just a fluff, sorry. Because you're taking time to name it and to really own what it was that what your part in that was. So I'm sorry for, and name it. And then how can we move on from here? I messed up. I know I shouldn't have done that. I want to do better. Can you forgive me? How do we move on from here? If this happens again, what will we do? How will we engage? Again, asking those who, what, when, where, why, how questions. And then our second problem is we make a lot of plans. We might have even poured a lot into that SMART action plan, and we had all of those steps, but then we forgot to follow up. Yellows especially struggle with that piece. Whites do a little bit. Your reds and your blues are better with follow-through. Whites and yellows, not as much. But all of us struggle with following back up. So we want to revisit the SMART action plan. Pull that back out. We were going to do this and this and this, see where we're at, measure our progress. And then if we need to change the plan moving forward, do that. It provides accountability, and people need that accountability, and some more than others, but following up with that. And then it provides an opportunity to give feedback and make change if necessary. So sometimes, again, I circle back to, find multiple ways to say it. Sometimes it's going to take all of those steps for some people. Not everyone, but some people need those constant reminders. Your yellow personalities need those constant reminders because they are so in the moment. They're not planning. They're flitting and floating here and there. They might need constant reminders. But your reds, you give me something to do, I'm going to see it through, I'm going to get it done. Blues might take a little bit longer. I might need one reminder or like a hurry it up, but I'm going to get it done. So it just depends. Different personality types might need more of that, but you might need all of those steps. Again, take that time for effective communication. So our recap here, you're going to own it, and then we're going to revisit what we've talked about previously, our plans and things like that, and see how we need to make those changes. So again, we have those 3 stages. The proactive, heading into it with the right mindset, the right attitude. Coactive, how we engage in the moment. And then that reactive, having that follow-up. Again, we are so connected, but effective communication does take time. And so do take that time to really spell things out and make it an effective two-way street. The biggest problem is we do not understand, or we don't listen to understand, we listen to reply. And so this is the big thing that I'd like for you to take away today. The one thing that I want to kind of drive into your brain as you walk away is we need to start listening to understand the other perspective and not just listening to what am I going to say next, what am I going to say next, what am I going to, and this is how I feel, this is how I feel, this is what I think. We need to be listening to understand that other perspective. Oops. And the one skill that I want you to take away are those questions, those great questions. Who, what, when, where, why, how. The next time you engage in conversation with someone, focus on that. Think about that. Try to engage with them using only questions. Just see what happens. I think you might be pleasantly surprised at what you might uncover. We make choices and life responds. If you don't like it, make a new choice. Again, you don't have to respond in the way that they came at you. You can make a choice to walk away, engage differently, ask some questions, but you have a choice on how you engage with those folks. Have any of you ever thrown a little pebble on the lake or stream and you've seen it kind of make ripples along the way? And those ripples, it might take some time, but they can be pretty far-reaching as they disperse out. So today, as you go back out into your workspaces, your social circles, think about that phrase from Brené Brown, are you making this a better place or are you making it a worse place? You can be that pebble of change that ripples out to whatever circles that you're in. But that's something that you do differently today, asking those questions, listening for perspectives, can be just the change for that circle that maybe somebody else is like, oh, that's really cool. I think I want to try that. And you might be surprised at how far-reaching that would be. Any final questions? Yes?
All of this relates to a common thing that is happening in our society now, which seems to be systemic. Do you see this having come from education or media or pace of society, or what is making this breakdown in communication so systemic in our culture today?
I mean, I think honestly it's a little bit of all of the above, particularly in the last, 12, 13 years when iPhones came out, smartphones became rampant, everybody's got one just about. Everything became so instant, and about that same time is when social media really started taking off. And so social media can be good in the sense that people who previously didn't feel that they had a voice, now they feel that they have this kind of constant platform to be heard. But then you get the flip side of that, of the emotions and the keyboard courage and things like that people kind of toss out there because I can say it on here, but they're not right in front of my face. And so I think honestly that has a lot to do with it. And with that, media, has fed into all of that as well. The way that they spin stories and, I don't know that they're always reporting. I don't think it's fake news, but they spin the facts in the way that makes sense for them, and what's going to be a juicy story. And so I think all of that has kind of played into it. It's just if you go out even to like a restaurant or a bar or something like that, people are not conversing anymore. Everybody's got their phone out. I used to, and this was about 10 years ago when I still lived in Knoxville, and Twitter had just kind of come out, and there was a group of us in Knoxville that would tweet up. So it would be just a bunch of us tweeters, and we would show up at a place and tweet about it and like hang out, but we're all tweeting while we're hanging out. Like it was just a whole weird thing for like a year that I did, and then I was like, this is weird. Like we're not really hanging out, we're just tweeting together. So I think that's played a lot into it.
I see it as problematic for us, having so many employees and stuff coming down the pipeline, that the next generation of available employees are becoming less and less qualified to do anything. And it's becoming a really big problem for us to try to find qualified people.
Yeah.
You need the people that can be your social media network and promoters in order to move your products, but you also need them to be educated enough in the real world to be able to live life and work. And
Yeah.
it's becoming a really big problem. This next generation isn't qualified.
Well, and I think parenting changed, and I'm experiencing that as well. There's been a lot of helicopter parenting where the parents have done everything for them and they've not had to do a lot on their own, and so then they sort of get tossed out there and they're supposed to know how to do all this stuff, and they don't, because somebody's kind of always done it for them. So I think that's played a little bit into that particular piece as well.
Not to mention the TV babysitting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And everybody gets a trophy.
Yes.
At the same time, though, I did like what you said at that. I feel like the workplace is changing in a lot of beneficial ways in that it is becoming more collaborative and accepting, more diversity, more, there was like a lot of training about how to communicate. And so, I mean, I do feel there's also an opening in that area where, it can become a much more pleasant place, to
Yes.
be in the workplace.
Employee engagement is a big buzzword right
Yeah,
now.
and
Like,
acceptance and, people feeling that they can be themselves. And so I do think that's a benefit of the evolving culture.
yes.
I was talking to a master chef this past week, who's also a friend of ours, who was relating some of this information, and he was telling me about how when he was learning how to become a chef, that he was working in hostile work environments. The previous method of teaching how to cook was your chef would yell at you and scream at you. And he was like, it was a really good thing for me because it taught me how to be a little harder on the edges and like take criticism well and actually get the job done. And I was like, yeah, I've learned the same way, but now that you're not allowed to do that in the workplace, now that is not a commonplace occurrence, it's like we're making a lot softer people, and I'm becoming more of a therapist than I am a chef, trying to help people. Like if they don't show up for work, the first place I look is their social media account, see if they're in jail. And I was like, so what do you think's gonna happen over the next generation, the next 10 years? Like, if you're not getting these people that can actually show up, deliver in high stress, high flow, dangerous work environments that can concentrate, pay attention under stress, and everybody's gonna break down when that stress is at its max, and you have to hold their hand through it, what's gonna happen to our industries? And I mean, me, construction, him chefing, us now the winery, it's a big, big question. You can't always be a therapist to your employees in that moment, and sometimes you just need to get the job done. And I don't know how to make that connection sometimes.
So, if you don't mind if I interject
Yeah.
for a second, but I just attended a Creating Excellence seminar for 2 days. And the key takeaway for that problem is to spend like a week, they had some time frame of intensive training from A to Z as to what the job is and what your expectation of the job is. Because way back when, we were hiring baby boomers who had been trained to work. We don't have that now because of the helicopter parent. And so training your employees before they become an employee is actually one of the key takeaways we got from that class. Is a thorough and exact set of what you expect and what the benefit for them is.
That's excellent. What is the motivation or incentive program or disciplinary program when things don't go right or they do go right?
Well, honestly, in this class, they expect 100%. They pay well, their benefits are good, and there's a zero margin for
Error.
lackadaisical, move on and find somebody else that will do the job. But it was a give-take situation. The jobs had potential for great benefit. And so that, that made a difference.
I will say, working with the Chick-fil-A team, I've been at that store now for 6 years. And I started out full-time as their marketing director, and then for about a year and a half, I was actually just a team member, and then they asked me to step back up on a part-time basis to be HR director. The restaurant industry, and fast food in particular, is known for having interesting folks. You know, they're not always educated. They're not always well trained. They don't know how to talk to people effectively. So it can be hard to find good people. Totally get that. We started a couple years ago, it's been right at 2 years ago, a point system where we look at a 3-month window at a time for accumulation. And if you get up to 9 points is when we take some type of disciplinary action. Can be termination, not necessarily, just depends on what it is. But we give points for being late, we give points for being absent regardless of the reason, because our thought process is you're not going to have a death in the family, hopefully, or sickness very often, most of us. And so initially, honestly, it reined that in. And we lost a ton of people in the beginning. And we really struggled through like finding people, and it felt like we were just throwing bodies in there, and only 2 of 5 would stick, you know, and it was rough for a while. But I'm here to say we're kind of on the other side of it now, and now we don't have the turnover that we did, and the people that we are getting are better quality, and they are sticking. And I will also add in there that we added a benefits package and pushed our pay up for full-time people and stuff like that. So it was kind of a collective effort of things. But that helped us a lot in kind of weeding out the wrong people for our team. And we had some people that, you know, they could go to McDonald's and probably be great, but we needed somebody more dependable, more action-oriented, whatever the case was. But that was something that helped us out. And we're now up to about 90 employees at that particular store. 90.
Is that just, that point system, was that just at your store you implemented that?
Yes. And we had tried it, something like that in the past, but we didn't have the right team on board. Again, it's kind of like my relevant example from earlier. You know, we had tried, we had mapped it out, but we didn't have the accountability piece. We didn't have the right team in place to make it accountable. And at the time that we rolled this out 2 years ago, we just happened to have a group of leaders that were willing to get behind it and give it a good, solid try. And it has worked out for us. And now, I mean, we're totally on board with it. And it's been, I think it has helped to reshape our culture at that store.
Okay. Well, I can tell you that we have gone over quite a bit, so that means
Yes.
everybody was engaged and liked what they heard. So thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you.
Our next program is utilizing MailChimp for your business or nonprofit. That's going to be on, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, on December the 4th. I keep forgetting today's November the 20th. I keep wanting to think it's early on in the month. So on December the 4th at 12 o'clock, we are having a conversation about utilizing MailChimp for your business or nonprofit. I'm assuming that means for promotion and advertising. So hope to see you there.
Will you have the real MailChimp, or is it kind of like Santa Claus? You just